Hi, my name is Ian Martin, and I put together this video to show how my R5-D4's gizmos and gadgets work. I have an event coming up in a couple of weeks, and I'm doing some maintenance, but I figured I might as well just take him apart and show you guys how he works. This video is not necessarily meant to be a how-to video or tutorial video. I really just wanted to show other builders how they could perform these tricks without necessarily spending an arm and a leg. So let's get started. So before I dive into it, I just wanted to show you the servos I'll be using throughout the video. So first is this little tiny hobby servo. I call it a hobby servo throughout the video, but this is an SG90 servo. This is a cheap 180 plastic servo. It cost me about $1.75, and I use these constantly throughout this build, so you see that a lot. The other servo I'm using is this 360 servo. This is the MG, which stands for Metal Gear 360M. And this servo is a continuous rotation servo, so it can spin around continuously around in a circle. I'm going to use that to propel a lot of things forward and up and down and things like that. This servo costs about, I want to say about $8. I get them in pairs. And lastly, you'll see this big giant servo. This is another Metal Gear servo. This is the MG, what is it, the 996R. This is a 180 servo, but this is more of a high torque servo. It does some of the more heavy-duty applications. So I drive all my servos using these 16-channel PWM servo driver boards from Adafruit. I'll put the link to these boards in the description for this video. They run on 5 volts, and each board lets you run up to 16 servos or LEDs. And you can daisy chain them together to run over 900 servos or LEDs. I have 3 of these boards in my Droid, and I'm running 37 servos and LEDs. But the key to driving these little cheap hobby servos is to only turn them on when you need them. So if you're using one of these boards, you can set PWM to 0, and what it essentially does is cut power to the servo. I'm sure a lot of you have experience with these. They get hot, they chatter, and they tend to burn out. If you do that, if you set PWM to 0 and you cut power and you only have power on when they're in the process of opening or closing, then they last a very, very long time. I've had these last hundreds of uses. I've only had one of them burn out because I was forcing it closed while it was on. So cut power to your servos and they'll last you a long time. You can do that using the Arduino servo library as well by using the detach command. So you attach the servo just before you move it, and you detach it just after you move it, and your servos will last a long time. So this is one that took me quite a while to figure out. So pretty much the back and forth mechanism runs using these linear rail guides that I got. I got one that was about 12 inches long and cut it in half, so I got one for the top and bottom. And then I bought an extra carriage block. I believe the rail cost me about $30 and the blocks are about $15 a piece. I use a 360 servo. It's a continuous rotation servo with a little rubber wheel at the top, and that just moves it back and forth as it spins to scoot them out. On this side, you see I've got the same story. This just has a Ninja Flex wheel on it. Moves it back and forth. For the saw, I used a little tiny little motor from a quadcopter. It's like a cheap quadcopter propeller motor that's here on the tip that spins the saw around. I just cut this saw out on my CNC machine out of plastic. And for the zapper, Douglas Bickert did a really, really good tutorial on how to make this actually zap, but pretty much uses a spark igniter and a bunch of AA batteries and a battery pack, and this turns on and off with a relay that's in the Droid, and arcs these 2 wires, makes that crazy spark. I've shocked myself with it a couple times. It hurts, but it's not going to kill you. But I got away with using no sheathing on my wiring or insulation or anything like that because it's a plastic printed Zapper, which I designed. But Douglas, because he's got an all aluminum one, has tells you how you can make it safe. This one's not too bad just because it's all plastic. But that's pretty much that mechanism. These rails work very well, and I've been very happy with this. So my utility arm mechanism is pretty darn simple. It's just a hobby servo and a coat hanger. The reason why I'm just able to use a simple little hobby servo is because my utility arms are mounted on magnets. So let me pop this little coat hanger out. I'll show you how this works. So I've got a magnet on the top and bottom. And then here I've got corresponding magnets. It's really dirty in there, but I kind of do it on purpose. And so there's no resistance on the movement at all. It flows very, very freely when it's on there. And then I just have this little mount that my coat hanger goes into that I've glued onto the bottom of my utility arm. And that moves it forward and backward. The good thing is about this is I can swap my utility arms for blue ones for when he wants to be R2-D2. But because there's no resistance on those arms, I can get away with just using a little tiny hobby servo to push it. The way this guy works, he works a lot better when he's got a lot of cards in there. Basically, I've got one of those 360 servos I showed you before that I use on my sliding mechanisms, with a rubber wheel. And then I got a rubber band that I glued this little nub onto, and that nub catches the bottom card and pushes it out. And I got a skateboard bearing here that's held in with a dowel, so when he rotates around, and that's it. This is not a very reliable mechanism, unfortunately. Oftentimes they get jammed up in there, or the rubber band gets too stretched out, or a lot of issues. So I've started designing a newer version. This is one I'm going to be offering to the club. And this is operated with a belt and a stepper motor. It's got a limit switch in there, so you get one perfect card every time, and so on. Hoping to get these offered to the club next month. So all my door hinges use the same exact hinge mechanism, and that's this guy here. So it's just a 3D printed hinge I designed specifically for this purpose. A hobby servo in the middle, with 2 arms. And some of them I had to modify a little bit. So let's see here. I had to cut the arms in a little bit for some of them, like the side doors, they're cut at an angle there. But for the most part, that's it. So all my panels are hinged except for the Motivator panel, which is held on with magnets. So I got a magnet on either side of the panel. And on the inside I've got a magnet, corresponding magnet on either side of this opening. So that just sets on there, and when the Motivator blows, it just blows off and goes flying through the air. All the other panels are hinged though, and I'll show you what that hinge looks like over here. So here's a dome hinge. I'll show you the inside. It's a real tight fit in there. So I have to cut the tab off of one side of this servo to fit this particular hinge. The goal is to get the center of motion as close to the top of the dome as I can. The other thing I had to do is, you'll see on the panels, see if I can get a good shot, I had to bevel the back of the panel. Otherwise, when it's coming up, it wants to hit the dome. So that bevel prevents that from happening. I'll show you the inside of the dome now. So here's the inside of my dome. The whole thing is powered, and I send my communication to my servo driver through this mag tag. I make these. They're available on the parts junkyard and astromech.net. There's the servo driver I showed you before, the same one I use in the body. It's driving all my LEDs for my eyes, these guys here, and all the servos. And here's that servo I just showed you. I just hot glue them in there because in case something goes wrong, I can pull them out easy. But they've held up great. It's a pretty simple setup in there. That's my dome. So I've got my upside down compressed air can in here on this print. It's connected with 2 thumb screws. Hold it in there. And here's the servo that moves up and down. I'm going to take this out and show you guys how it works. So I can't take too much credit for this one. R2 builders have been using upside down compressed air cans for ages now to do this effect. I just found these littler cans called Blow Off. And they're small, nice and small, so they fit in my droid, but they don't last all that long. And then the end piece I found on Thingiverse. It was actually meant for a silly string shooter. And that works great. I've just got a tube there at the end. I had to pull this nozzle off of a silicone lubricant can so I could get the straw to fit onto it. So when I change my cans out, I just pop that little nozzle back on and off of it. And this threads through a little tube on the front of my droid. This tube threads through a larger tube on the front of my droid, so it's directed right outside the socket. And then that servo at the bottom is connected to a coat hanger. It moves up and down, presses the nozzle, and that's that. Here's another pretty simple gadget. So both of these doors here are powered via a mag tag that I have on my rear door here. Right there. And there. And I have these long hinges that I use in my R2 dome. They're just hot glued on there right now. It's kind of a rush job. And then I've got this tube, my little egg hopper. It's just a PVC tube that runs down my droid. I get 7 eggs in there. So I just take an egg, drop it in there. On my remote, PlayStation down, spits it out. So it's just a little hobby servo in there. Moves back and forth. That's it. So this awesome piece of engineering here was made by Mr. Badley. I can't take credit for any of this. The only thing I did was make this mount for it to fit the Senna frame. And then I redid this arm here so that it cleared my insides a little, because it was a little bulky before for my setup. But this thing works, but with this big servo, moves the arm up and down. And this little tiny hobby servo here pushes a piece of filament in and out. I used nylon from a weed whacker for mine. And so what happens is, so you'll see this little servo at the top, pushes that little piece of filament, and then here on the end, you see this Ninja Flex Y, gets pushed by the filament and opens and closes the arms. So the same exact mechanism I use on the other side here for the interface arm, pushes the outside in and out. It's got a little corkscrew in there. The piece of filament just pushes that forward and back. It makes it spin. Moves up and down. Same way, just mirrored on the other side. I put a little magnet on the tip of mine just so we can grab things. And that's it. So here's my simple Autodome setup. I've got this little roller switch here, and when that presses, it reads high or low back to the Arduino. And then on my Lazy Susan side, the part that spins around, I've got this flat print here, and when the roller rolls over that, it engages, lets me know my dome is centered. So if I send my dome right, see it, send it spinning, and this gets pressed, he knows he's centered. If I send it left, it's pressed, I know it's centered. And this opens up a whole realm of programming options where I can say rotate the dome around 3 times and then stop, or while you're moving, rotate the dome around but go center every once in a while so that it doesn't drift to the back. And it's all done with this little roller switch. So here's my bad motivator mechanism under the hood. Let me show you how it works first. So what I have going on here is I've got a hobby servo here that moves back and forth and pushes this lever. And that lever releases these 2 springs. I've got one here and one down there you can't see. And those springs are from a toilet paper plunger, which has a lot of force to it. They send that motivator flying up, which pops off the panel. And then on the back, I've got 2 air pumps. They look like this. These are cheapish air pumps I got on eBay. And then those pump up air up through these vape pen atomizers. When I get those, they look like this, and I pop the top off and I solder the bottom after I grind it down a bit. That fits right on top of the air pump. And then I fill those with pure vegetable glycerin. When you get vape fluid, it's got PG and VG in it, and the VG stands for vegetable glycerin. So instead of buying vape fluid, I just got pure vegetable glycerin, which works fantastic for producing the smoke. So the air gets pumped up through them, it goes up through these tubes, which fan out and come right out here at the top, and produce a lot of smoke. The motivator itself is a 3D model designed by Mr. Badley again. I've just modified it to fit my setup. This thing kind of needs its own video, really, to show you how I put it together, but I'm revising this over and over again. You can see it's starting to crack up here because a lot of force is going up and starting to make it break. And then I have some fluid that keeps leaking out the back and some other problems, so I need to kind of redesign this whole setup. But that's how that's working right now. So this mechanism's kind of thrown together, and it's all glued in there, so I can't pull it out to show you guys, but I can kind of give you the gist. So I've got some magnets underneath this plate. I've got magnets on the bottom of my panel, so when the kids put it there, it wants to slap it in place like that. And I've got a belt on the bottom. It's just a piece of belt that I cut, so it's nice and rough. And then in there I got one of those 360 servos I showed you guys earlier, but it's got a rubber Lego wheel attached to it, and it pushes up against that belt, and it's rough enough for it to scoot in and out. I haven't had a lot of success with it, but it works for the most part. Just sometimes it doesn't want to go all the way in, and I have to open and close it multiple times. And then I just put some blinky LEDs in there so that it's more noticeable. But that's it. Here's my Lifeform Scanner. I keep it in this tube so when I'm pulling the dome on and off it doesn't get knocked about. It runs on a linear rail guide just like my Saw and my Zapper down below, only this one runs on a geared track. You can kind of see back there. It's got a hobby servo down here that rotates the dish back and forth. And these wires that coil around here also provide power to this little LED that flashes on and off. I'm going to pull this out of here. It only goes up and down when the dome's on because my servo driver is in the dome, and it comes back through this mag tag. So here's another angle of it. Hopefully you can see the gear in there. And this hobby servo right here spins back and forth. Causes the whole dowel to spin. That's it. Thanks for watching my video. Again, I did not intend this to be a how-to or tutorial video, so I'm not sure I'll be able to answer a lot of questions about specific aspects of this project. But if you need to get a hold of me or you want to follow more of my projects, you can find me at dedrickcreations.com. Hope to see you there.